Okay, I don't know how many of you have seen this curve, but it's quite interesting because as far back as 2000, our share prices started rising, and they started rising because of China. Then we were hit with the GFC, the global financial crisis, in that 2008-2009 period, and that had a fair effect on the JSE. Now you might think, why? What has this got to do with commodities? Actually, a heck of a lot. Because then what happened after that is there was a recovery, and that recovery continued. But that recovery actually continued just because of China. And really what happened with NASPAS, and NASPAS taking over up to 20% of the JSE. So you strip 20% out of the JSE, and suddenly that curve looks very different. That curve looks something like that, which happened to the commodities price cycle. Okay, and you'll see quite a lot of similarities. For many years, the commodity prices lagged. This is a combined commodity price that includes all your metals and that. And they lagged for a long time. So they started rising in the early 2000s. But that rise was pretty substantial. And this is done on a graph. They just it overall rating, and it's actually discounted as well. What happened there? Obviously, what occurred then is the GFC, and again, but China caused a major recovery, and a very fast recovery. Then we hit a key point in about 2011, in right early period. Why? Because from 2000 to 2005, the mining fraternity did not believe that the commodity prices would carry on rising. From 2005 to 2007, they started believing it. They thought it would go through the stratosphere. And suddenly you had people even globally making some really interesting comments about what was going to go on, and that this was going to go on forever and a day. Well, nothing goes up forever and a day. And that's what had to happen, because they started building mines late in the sort of mid-2000s, where they should have started building mines in the 2000s, early. You could not stop building those mines. So, because it takes to bring a mine online, it takes 5-10 years minimum. When I talk about that key point there in 2011, what happened there is supply demand started really matching. In fact, the supply overtook the demand completely. And you had to have a correction. And that correction took 5 years. We only came out of that correction around about third quarter 2016. But we actually knew it because we've been tracking this quite closely. So the rise in the commodity prices of late, or the recovery maybe is a better word, more in line with where they were, is because of China as well. Make no mistake, China makes up at least 50% of this, but the rest of the world, which makes up the other 50%. So just going forward, the way we look at commodities in Multotec, we split them into bulk commodities. Your coal, it's fairly general, most people do. Your coal, iron, or bauxite, chrome, etc. Your precious metals and diamonds. Your base metal, obviously the base metals themselves. And then your new metals, which we refer to, things like lithium, iridium, cobalt. It's not a new metal, but it's new metal mining in that sense. And your rare earths and your heavy minerals. Heavy minerals have come back in, very much so. Their prices recovered pretty dramatically. And zircon is predicted to run at about $2,500 per ton for the next 10 years because of Chinese demand. In Multotec, we've had historically for many years the big four in the commodities. And as you can see, it's split between bulk, base metals, and precious metals fairly evenly. But those four constitute up to about, as you can see right there, 40-50% of all of Multotec's business. The other ones are coming through, and this is going to change. The key point here is this will change, and this is applicable to every company that operates in the mining industry, but it'll change in the future because of what's coming through and the new metals, etc. So there are going to be changes that you'll see over the next 10 to 20 years. One interesting one, though, to me, and always been very interesting and watched very carefully, is iron ore. Iron ore bucked that commodity price crash completely. Why? Again, just purely because of China. The GFC, as you can see, occurred between the two red dotted lines. But the iron ore price, which had been pretty stable up to that point, remember for many years it had run at around about $10 a ton, had then climbed to about $50, $60 a ton, then rose to really incredible heights. Okay. It's obviously supply and demand came into play because of the Chinese offtake, okay, and that has recovered. And since it's more on a trend line, and that trend line that I show there just shows that they're running at about $64, $65. I don't know. I didn't check this morning what it was. But that's more realistic. And when you take a long-term trend, it's actually very much in line with the 2.5% average growth that we see globally in terms of population. But interestingly on base metals, one of the things is the actual investments in copper, particularly, has been declining over the last couple of years. And copper mine supply, in terms of head grade, is declining as well. We are heading for a major copper shortage. That doesn't mean that there are no copper deposits. There are. They're just in very difficult areas or very sensitive areas in terms of environment. So there's copper deposits out there, but copper is going to be in serious deficit in the next 5 or 6 years. Just looking at average pricing. Now the line we've extended out there is sort of a correction line, because that's what is being indicated by all the experts. We're not experts, we're not commodity price experts, but and that means that the copper price is leveled off. And it's a reasonable rate. I mean, the average price of copper at $6,000 a ton, most mines should be able to sustain themselves at that price going forward. And that's predicted out to at least around about 2023 on the dotted line. So it's a good outlook for copper overall. Lead, actually the same thing. Average price currently around about the $2,000 per ton mark, but the outlook going forward is the same. So that's good. Again, good news. The same applies to zinc. Exactly the same. The outlook for the next 3 to 8 years or so is good. Also, again, because of Chinese demand. Nickel, a little bit. Nickel prices spiked like I've never seen in 2007. I mean, that was $52,000 per ton. It was crazy. But obviously, of late, far more realistic, that it is the supply demand that's playing a major role there. And those prices will stick around about the $10,000, $12,000 per ton mark for quite a few years going forward. Aluminium, same sort of thing as the others. Now, what is really interesting to me is most unsustainable businesses have 5 characteristics. They're capitally intensive, they're energy intensive, they're labor intensive, and they're heavily unionized. And there's no product differentiation. So what does that actually say about mining itself and the environment that we operate in? So one of the things that Multotec did, if you look back, and I'm going to go back to the slides, is that we differentiated geographically, we differentiated commodity-wise. And that's been our saving grace as a company. And I'm pretty sure it applies if other companies utilize the same sort of information, they would be able to do the same sort of thing. So just one other interesting comment that has also helped South Africa a lot is the rand devaluation and that impact on the commodity prices rand-wise. What should have happened, South Africa has missed a commodity cycle in the 2000s, and it's busy missing another one right now, which is chaotic. Australia did not, the Canadians did not, and the South Americans did not. But South Africa is. We're not doing a great job there. Copper, the same thing occurred in rand prices. Rand prices saw a GFC, but it recovered very fast and is actually, relatively speaking, really high in rand terms. So you can see the opportunities. Gold price as well. Gold mines obviously have come under a lot of pressure as they go deeper, but in South Africa. But in Africa, it's not the case. It's fairly shallow mining, so relatively lower costs. So coal, the same sort of thing happened. Coal has actually really worked well. Just to illustrate, we work a lot with commodities providers. One of them being AfriForesight. There are very good projections of what's going to occur on each of the commodities going forward. So you can actually link our work to their work to be able to see what you should do strategically as a company. It's just an example of it and what you can do. And so worldwide growth projection going forward globally, around somewhere between 3 and 4, depending on where you are. Unfortunately, in South Africa, well, not too good. But but the outlook is great. Richards Bay coal thermal price, same thing. When you go to Q4 of 2019, it all looks good. So the more coal we can produce or export is good, but there's higher demand locally for local as well for the power stations. And those prices have risen dramatically. Thank you.